Okay, we are now in Module 3. Well, we're still in Module 3, but now we're in Part 2 of Module 3, all right? In this packet, we have lessons 4, 5, and 6. In the first part of Module 3, we learned how to add and subtract positive and negative fractions and decimals. In this one, we're going to learn how to multiply and divide positive and negative fractions and decimals, okay? So the first lesson is 3.4. 3.4 is multiplying rational numbers. So in this lesson, we're going to multiply and divide positive and negative fractions. No, in this lesson, we're just going to multiply positive and negative fractions and decimals. Okay, so let's review the multiplying rules. Okay, so when you multiply, if you have same signs, the product or answer of the multiplication problem is positive. So same signs means a positive and a positive. Same signs also means a negative and a negative. The answer will be positive. If you have different signs, the answer is negative. Okay, simple. Multiplication and division have the same rules, same signs, answers positive, different signs, answers negative. So what we're really going to review today, more than the rules with positives and negatives, is how to multiply with fractions and how to multiply with decimals. Okay, so let's get started with fractions. All right, to multiply fractions, you first multiply the numerators together, and then multiply the denominators. That basically means you multiply the top numbers together, and then you multiply the bottom numbers together. Numerators are the top number of a fraction. Denominators are the bottom number of a fraction. So that would look something like this. This is a negative times a positive. Remember, if you've got parentheses right next to each other, that's multiplication. Okay? So this is a negative times a positive. Different signs, the answer is going to be negative. All right? So to get our answer, we're going to multiply the numerators. 1 times 3 is 3. Multiply our denominators. 3 times 5 is 15. And that's it. That's how you multiply positive and negative fractions. But the product, or the answer here, needs to be written in what's called lowest terms. Sometimes you hear it called simplest, the simplest terms or the lowest terms. So there are two methods to make sure the product or the answer is in the lowest terms. Okay, and that's what we're going to go over that next. Basically, reducing fractions. That's another thing that you hear this called. Putting the fraction in lowest terms, or simplifying to the lowest terms, or reducing the fraction to simplest terms. You'll hear it, all those words. Okay, so two methods to do that. The first one is to reduce the fraction after you multiply. Okay, the first one you just multiply like we just did in the first example, and then you reduce it afterwards. So let's do that one first. So now we have a negative times a negative. That means the answer is going to be positive. We multiply the numerators together. 1, 2, 3. Denominator 3 times 5 is 15. Now, when I see 3/15, I can see, because I know my multiplication table by heart, I know that that's a fraction that can be reduced. And the reason I know that is because 3 and 15 have what's called a common factor. All right? So you are going to reduce the answer by dividing both the top and the bottom. Okay, DFC stands for greatest common factor. The GFC of 3 and 15 is 3. Now, if you're not sure how to do that, or what factors even are, factors are the problems or the numbers in a multiplication problem. So 3 times 1 is 3 is or 3. 3 times 5 is 15. So 3 is a factor for 15. 3 is the biggest factor that 3 and 15 have in common. So to reduce this fraction, we divide by 3. So divide 3 by 3 and you get 1. Divide 15 by 3 and you get 5. So the simplest form of 1/3 times 3/5 is 1/5. That's the answer in simplest form or lowest terms. Okay, and you can see it's right there. Okay. If you're not sure if that didn't make a lot of sense, we're going to do some practice, but rewind, watch this little 1-minute section again, and ask any questions you need to in class. That's the first way to reduce the answer to a multiplication problem, to multiply and then reduce after you already get the multiplication answer. There is another way, and that is to reduce before you multiply. Sometimes this is easier because you're dealing with smaller numbers. After you do the multiplication, you've got big numbers in your answer. So if you do the simplifying or reducing before you multiply, sometimes you can be dealing with smaller numbers. Okay, so the second method is called cross canceling. It means you reduce before you multiply. Okay, and now we have positive times positive. Again, same signs, so answer's positive. I'm not going to multiply first, though. I'm going to cross cancel first. So what I have to do is find one numerator, and the 1 is important, and one denominator that have a GFC. Oh, I keep saying GFC. Oh man, it's GCF. I do that all the time. It's greatest common factor. I did it up here too. Greatest common factor. The C, it's GCF. All right, sorry about that. It's greatest common factor, GCF. Okay. All right, so we're going to find one numerator and one denominator. And when I say one numerator and one denominator, that's because they don't have to be part of the same fraction. So for 1/3, this is the numerator, 1, right? And this is the denominator, 3. But when you do cross canceling, it can be in the same fraction, one numerator, one denominator, but it can also be a numerator from one fraction and a denominator in a different fraction, okay? In this case, this 3 and this 3. These 3's can cross cancel because they both have a factor of 3, right? We did it before. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 1 is 3. So for both of those 3's, 3 is a factor because 3 times 1 is 3. Okay? Remember, factor is the number in a multiplication problem. Well, that means I can, so if they have a GCF, I divide the one numerator and the one denominator, divide them by the GCF, okay? So I'm going to divide this 3. 3 goes into 3 how many times? Okay, my fingers are in the way, sorry. This 3 and this 3, okay? One numerator, one denominator. So if I divide both these by their GCF, which is 3, 3 divided by 3 is 1. Basically, I'm going to do 3 divided by 3. And this denominator is going to become 1. If I do 3 divided by 3, this denominator becomes 1. Okay, so now I've cross-canceled these 3's, and they're now 1's. So this is 1/1 times 1/5. So some of you might be saying, well, where did she get all those numbers? Here's the numerator, and now here's the new denominator. Numerator, denominator. Here's the numerator, right? 1, and here's the denominator, 1/5. Now I multiply. So I reduced them first. I reduced to simplest terms before I multiply. And when you do this with multiplication, it doesn't have to be the numerator and the denominator from the same fraction. It can be one numerator and one denominator, any one numerator with any one denominator. Okay, now 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 5 is 5. So notice that we got the same answer. Up here, we also got 1/5 as our final answer, 1/5. This, in the top one, we reduced the fraction after we multiplied. So we multiplied them together and we got 3/15. Then we reduced and got 1/5. Down here, we did the reducing first and then we multiplied and got 1/5. Okay, so basically you multiply the numerators together after you've gotten the new numerators, right? And then you multiply the denominators. Oh, whoops, this should say multiply the denominators. Again, if you didn't understand that, but I went too fast, just pause, rewind just 1 minute or 2 minutes and watch that again. Cross-canceling is actually easier if you can get used to it, because you will be able to multiply smaller numbers if you reduce the fractions first. All right, so that is multiplying fractions with positives and negatives. Basically, the positives and negatives part is the same. If you have the same signs, 2 negatives, 2 positives, the answer is going to be positive. If you have different signs, one's negative, one's positive, the answer is going to be negative. And to basically multiply fractions, you multiply the numerators together, multiply the denominators together. But there are 2 ways to reduce the lowest terms. All right, let's move on to doing this with decimals. This takes a little bit longer, okay? So eventually with these kinds of problems, to be honest, you're just going to use a calculator. But for now, let's make sure you understand how to do it without a calculator. But for just this module, the rest of module 3, there's no calculators. But I think starting with module 4, we get to just use calculators. But this is just so you understand what you're doing when you use a calculator. Okay? So to multiply decimals, first you multiply as if you would with a whole number. So basically what that means is you ignore the decimals at first. You do the whole problem ignoring the decimals, okay? Then when you get your answer, your final answer, you're going to place the decimal point in the answer. You're going to place the decimal point in the answer or in the product by using the sum of the decimal places in the factors. So that basically means you're going to count up how many decimal places were in the numbers that are in the problem, and then use that number for the number of decimal places in your answer. So remember, factors are the numbers in the multiplication problem. Okay. All right. So let's do this. We'll write the steps out one by one, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see that whole box in one screen. At least I think I am. And then I'll write out the steps, and I'll actually do the steps as I write them. Okay. So here's 26.25 times, remember, parentheses right next to each other means multiplication. Okay. So 26.25 times negative 2.3. First and foremost, number 1, if I see a positive times a negative, I know my answer is going to be negative. Okay, so this equals a negative. That's the first thing I do, because if I don't do it first, I'll forget to put the sign in. So do that right away. All right, rewrite with one number or factor above the other. So I always write the longer number on top. And remember, with multiplication and addition, you can move the numbers around. It doesn't matter, you'll get the same answer. Subtraction and division, you cannot do that. But with multiplication and addition, it doesn't matter which number you put first. So I always put the long number first. So I'm going to put 26.25 on top. And then I'm going to put 2.3 on bottom. Okay, you do not have to line the decimals up. You don't. I kind of did, but you don't have to. It doesn't matter. Okay, so what you're going to do once you've written the two numbers down is you're going to multiply the bottom left number. You're going to multiply the bottom left number one number at a time with the top numbers. Okay, so let's do that. This is the bottom left number, and I'm going to multiply them one at a time times the top numbers. So I'm going to do 3 times 5, then I'm going to do 3 times 2, and then I'm going to do 3 times 6, 3 times 2. Okay, so let's do that first. 3 times 5 is 15. Carry the 1, bring the 5 down. 3 times 2 is 6, plus that 1 is 7. Remember, I'm ignoring the decimals until I get to the very end. So I did 3 times 5, I did 3 times 2. Now I'm going to do 3 times 6, which is 18. I'm going to carry the 1, bring down the 8. Okay. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. All right. So I'm going to put a 0 as a placeholder, which that means put a 0 right here. So that's a placeholder for this place. Now I'm on this number, right? So I skip the spot and I'm going to go to this spot. So put a 0 there. Then multiply, that should say the. Then multiply the next bottom number to the right. Okay, this is the next number, should say to the left, sorry. So multiply the next bottom number to the left, that's this one, with the numbers on top. All right, ready? So 2 times 5 is 10. Carry the 1, bring down the 0. Okay, notice I put it under the very next number. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Okay, 2 times 6 is 12. So carry the 1, bring down the 2. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Okay, now the next step is that I add the two products together. So this is a product of the first multiplication. This is a product of the second multiplication. Now I add them together. So 5 plus 0 is 5. 7 plus 0 is 7. 8 plus 5 is 13. 7, 8, 9, 10. And then 6. So the answer, so now is when I deal with the decimals. So notice I ignored the decimals the whole time. So you just multiply them together as if you would a whole number. That's what we wrote in the notes. Multiply decimals, first multiply as you would with whole numbers. So we literally ignored the decimals. You don't deal with the decimals with multiplication until the end. All right? So you're going to place the decimal by adding the decimal places in the factors. Okay, so let's do that. We're going to add up the decimal places in the factors. So this first factor, remember factors are the numbers in the problem, in the multiplication problem. This first factor has 2 decimal places, 1, 2. The 2 and the 5, that's 2 decimal places. That means the places after the decimal. So that's 2. And then there's 1 in this factor. This 3 is 1 decimal place. So 1, 2, 3. There's a total of 3 decimal places in our factors. So add them together, 1, 2, 3. So that means we need 3 decimal places in our answer. 1, 2, 3. And we put the decimal right there. And now there's 3 decimal places in our answer. So remember, the answer had to be negative though, because we had a positive times a negative. So our answer is negative 60 and 375 thousandths. That's the answer. Okay. We have two more, and this is really just to show you that a negative times a negative. Now our answer is going to be positive. Okay. So let's do this one. And again, I'm going to write the big long one first. 342 times this one, 1.23. And I'm ignoring the decimals. Ignore the decimals, okay? And I'm also ignoring the signs because I already put the sign of my answer. I don't need to deal with it anymore. So I'm just going to do it kind of fast. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. 3 times 8 is 24, plus 1 is 25. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 2 is 14. Now I'm going to make a placeholder because I'm going to go to this 2, one placeholder. And I like to cross these out, otherwise I get them mixed up. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 8 is 16. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. Now I need two placeholders. I'm going 1, 2. This is 1 over here. I'm going to cross these out. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 8 is 8. And 1 times 4 is 4. Now I put my line. I'm going to add up those numbers. 6 plus 0, 0 is 6. 4 plus 2 is 6. 8 plus 2 is 10. I'm going to carry the 1, bring down the 0. Let's see. 6 plus 4 is 10. Plus 5 is 15. Plus 1 is 16. 6 plus 4 is 10. Plus 3 is 13. Plus 1 is 14. 9 plus 1 is 10. Plus 8 is 18. Plus 1 is 19. 4 plus 1 is 5. All right. Notice I ignored the decimal the entire time, and now I'm going to place the decimal. How many decimal places do I need? I'm going to count up the decimal places in my problem, in the factors. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need 5 decimal places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my answer is positive 59.46066. Okay. One more. Last one, negative times positive. My answer is going to be negative. Okay, do that first. Otherwise, you'll forget. We have so many steps after that, we forget about the sign. Do the sign first. In fact, I'm going to put it down here because that's where my answer is going to end up being. Right. I'm going to write this number first because it's longer. And remember, in multiplication, it does not matter what order you put them in. Multiplication and addition, you can move the numbers around. Subtraction and division, you cannot. With multiplication, you can. So I'm going to write this number first because I like to write the longer number first. So 45.92 times 5.04. Now, 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 9 is 36. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 3 is 23. 4 times 4 is 16, plus 2 is 18. I'm going to cross those numbers out. I'm not going to multiply with this 0 because everything times 0 is 0. It's just a bunch of zeros. So I don't need to do that, right? I'm going to go to this 5, but that's 2 placeholders over. So 1, 2, because I'm now going the 1, and this is would be 1 0 added. This would be another 0 added. I need to add 2 zeros, okay? Now, 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 9 is 45, plus 1 is 46. 5 times 5 is 25, plus 4 is 29. 5 times 4 is 20 plus 2 is 22. Okay, now I'm going to add 8 plus 0 is 0, 6 plus 0 is 6, 3 plus 0 is 3, 8 plus 6 is what? 10, 14. 9 plus 1 is 10, plus another one is 11. So that's 3 and that's 2. Now the decimals. Now the decimals. How many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the decimal goes right there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 places. So the answer is negative 231.4368. All three of those problems had something a little bit different in them. Remember, with multiplication, same signs, answer is positive. So positive times a positive, the answer is positive. But a negative times a negative, those are same signs, answer is positive. When you have different signs, when one is positive and one is negative, that's when you get a negative answer, okay? That is multiplying positive and negative fractions and decimals. Now, your learn and do for this lesson, you have IXLs, you have an HMH, you have this paper pencil. Notice there is a video link. So there is a video on how to do some of these problems. Okay, all right, go move on to your learn and do, IXL, HMH, and paper pencil.